The story you are about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts featuring historical characters, events, or places that has played a role in shaping history. Please sit back and listen as I recite this narrative for you. Paul Bernardo, with the help of his wife Karla Homolka, plagued a Canadian suburb with a series of horrific rapes that were only the tip of an iceberg. The couple even became known as the Ken and Barbie Killers. In the end, Paul Bernardo was found to be responsible for at least 13 rapes and perhaps 4 killings. As a young boy, Bernardo was often described as a happy boy who was always smiling, despite the chaos surrounding him and his family life. His father Kenneth had been arrested and charged with the molestation of a young girl, and it was found he had also been sexually abusing his daughter as well. On learning of her husband's deeds, Bernardo's mother fell into a deep depression, withdrawing herself from the family life around her and living in the basement of their house. It wasn't until he was 16 when his mother revealed to him that he was actually the result of an extramarital affair that Bernardo's outward behavior began to noticeably change. He began to refer to his own mother as a slob and a whore out in the open, never worrying about who would hear. When he went off to study at the University of Toronto, he became adept at picking women up at bars only to later humiliate and beat them. Paul Bernardo was good-looking and charming, an unfortunate combination that he used to manipulate women and take them off their guard. Before long, he would give in to a far darker impulse. By then, he was immersed in dark sexual fantasies, often beating the women he went out with, and he would also enjoy humiliating women out in public. Starting in May of 1987, the suburb of Scarborough in Ontario was plagued by a series of horrific crimes. In the early hours of the morning of May 4, 1987, a young woman getting off the bus was grabbed and brutally raped near her parents' home. Over the next week alone, there would be 2 more similar assaults. The women were all between the ages of 15 and 21, and the attacks all included beatings, intense verbal abuse, and dire threats to discourage victims from going to the police, which led the authorities to conclude that they had all been perpetrated by the same man, whom the newspaper quickly dubbed the Scarborough Rapist. During his nearly 5-year rampage as the Scarborough Rapist, Paul Bernardo raped or attempted to rape at least 19 young women, and this is only the official count. A couple of Bernardo's victims managed to fight him off, and Bernardo was actually questioned by the police twice, but he was never named as an official suspect. It wasn't until May of 1990 that one of Bernardo's victims was able to give police an accurate description of her attacker, and by then, the Scarborough Rapist had become even more unhinged. His path crossed with a young woman named Karla Homolka in October 1987. He was 23 years old and she was 17, and they had an instant sexual attraction. Even better for Bernardo, Karla encouraged his dark fantasies and sadistic sexual behavior. Now he could do what he wanted and indulge in those fantasies that resided in his twisted mind. They quickly began a sadomasochistic relationship in which Bernardo acted as an abusive master and Homolka as a willing slave. The whole while they dated, Paul Bernardo was also brutally raping girls in Scarborough with Homolka's knowledge and approval. An already established serial rapist, Bernardo's crimes became even more vicious in 1990 with the murder of his sister-in-law. 3 years into the relationship, Paul Bernardo was getting bored. He complained that Homolka was not a virgin when they met. And soon, his attention focused on Tammy Homolka, who was the younger sister of Karla, Bernardo's fiancée, and he flirted with her all the time. He became rather obsessed with the younger girl and went from looking through her window to going into her bedroom while she was sleeping and masturbating. Karla, eager to please, actually broke the catches on the windows in Tammy's room to make it easier for Bernardo to enter. On the night of July 24, 1990, Karla cooked dinner and served Tammy's laced with crushed Valium tablets. She quickly became unconscious and Karla watched while Bernardo raped her. But this wasn't to be the end of the attacks on Tammy. The night of December 23, 1990, Tammy was given a rum, an eggnog cocktail which was laced with sleeping pills. Tammy, who was 15 years old at that time, fell into unconsciousness quickly again, but this time, after they had undressed her, Karla placed a cloth soaked with holothane, an anesthetic, over her nose and mouth. The couple then set up a video camera and filmed themselves as they raped unconscious Tammy. At one point, Tammy started vomiting, and when attempts to revive her failed, Karla and Bernardo finally called emergency services, but they made sure she was dressed and placed in another room first to hide any evidence of what they had done. Tammy never woke up, and a few hours later, she was pronounced dead. Although the mysterious chemical burn on her face was noted, the drugs in her system were not detected, and her death was ruled an accident as the result of choking on vomit from alcohol poisoning. 6 months later, on June 15, 1991, Bernardo was driving through Burlington when he came across Leslie Mahaffey, who was 14 years old at that time. It was the early hours of the morning, and because she had missed her curfew, she had been locked out of the house. Bernardo approached her and she asked if he had a cigarette. She followed him back to his car and was quickly blindfolded and forced in. When they reached Bernardo and Karla's house, the couple began to play out the same ritual they had done with Tammy. They tortured and raped Mahaffey, videotaping the whole event. Her hands were tied and the blindfold was still in place. But at one point, she stated the blindfold was slipping, which meant she could see Bernardo and Karla. They continued to rape and torture her through the night. The next day, Mahaffey was given a little dose of the drug Halcyon, which was administered by Karla according to Bernardo. But Karla had a different story. She claimed that the young girl was actually strangled to death by Bernardo. Either way, they now had to dispose of the body and decided to dismember her body and seal the pieces in cement. The next day, Bernardo purchased bags of cement and stupidly kept the receipts. Using his grandfather's circular saw, Mahaffey was cut up and put into the cement, which was made into blocks. They then transported the blocks to Lake Gibson to dump them, making several trips. On June 29, 1991, Homolka and Bernardo got married, enjoying an elaborate wedding ceremony which included their entrance in a white horse-drawn carriage. At the same time, a grisly discovery took place. A horrified couple canoeing in Lake Gibson discovered concrete blocks containing human body parts in the water. It was later discovered that these body parts belonged to Leslie Mahaffey. The next murder took place on April 16, 1992. The couple was now scouring the streets looking for potential victims, and on this afternoon, they saw Christine French, 15 years old, walking along the street. Karla approached the girl carrying a map under the ruse of being lost and needing directions. As French attempted to help Karla, Bernardo attacked her from behind at knife point and forced her into the car. French's ordeal lasted longer than the others as she was raped, sodomized, and tortured throughout the 3 days of Easter weekend. To help subdue her, she was forced to drink vast amounts of alcohol. All of this was videotaped by the couple once again. This time, they hadn't bothered to blindfold her, so it seemed their intention was to kill her right from the start. She was killed the next day, with Bernardo later claiming Karla had beaten her with a rubber mallet and French had been accidentally strangled by a noose around her neck that was tied to a chest. However, Karla claimed Bernardo spent 7 minutes strangling the girl while she watched. When her nude body was found on April 30, 1992, it was clear that she had been washed. They left her body battered and her hair partially shaved in a ditch along a rural road. Investigating officers originally thought that the hair was cut so the killer could keep a trophy, but Karla later explained it was to try and slow down the identification of the body. Bernardo and Karla had both been interviewed by the police on numerous occasions previously for a variety of reasons, including the death of Tammy, the Scarborough Rapist, and Bernardo's habit of stalking women. A report was filed on May 12, 1992, that Bernardo should be interviewed again for the death of French, and he was briefly interviewed with the officers thinking he wasn't likely to be their suspect. The Green Ribbon Task Force was created 3 days later to investigate the murders of Mahaffey and French. Bernardo and Karla applied to have their names legally changed to the surname Teale, which was the name of a fictional serial killer from a movie. In January 1993, Homolka left her husband after he dealt her a particularly vicious beating with a flashlight and ended up requiring treatment at the local hospital, and she laid battery charges against Bernardo. He was arrested but released, and Karla went to stay with relatives. By now, DNA testing was being done on the evidence from the crime scenes and samples Bernardo had provided 2 years prior. The DNA testing came back as a match, and investigators started surveillance of Bernardo. They interviewed Karla on February 9, 1993, telling her of their suspicions of his involvement in the rapes and murders, but she said nothing. Until later that night, realizing the gig was up, Homolka quickly got a lawyer and sought a plea bargain in exchange for testifying against Paul Bernardo. She claimed Bernardo had told her he'd raped at least 30 women. The government agreed to a 12-year sentence in exchange for her cooperation, although this backfired dramatically when the videotapes the couple had made, showcasing their gruesome crimes, were discovered and Homolka's true nature was revealed. Karla Homolka was not the abused victim she had attempted to portray herself as, but rather a cruel sadist. Bernardo was finally arrested on February 17, 1993. Because of the limitations and specifications of the search warrants, it took investigators 71 days to fully search Bernardo's house. They desperately tried to find the videotapes Karla had mentioned, but only managed to find a short tape of Karla involved in oral sex with an unidentified woman. Bernardo went to trial in 1995 for the murders of Mahaffey and French. Despite trying to convince the jury that Karla was the actual murderer or that the deaths had been accidental, he was found guilty on September 1, 1995 of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of aggravated sexual assault. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. However, he was declared a dangerous offender, which means it is unlikely he will ever be paroled. Homolka was ultimately released in 2005 and since remarried and given birth. Paul Bernardo was found guilty of all charges against him and consequently sentenced to life for the rape, murder, and kidnap of 2 teenage girls, though it is believed he'd killed a couple more. His rape victims number somewhere in the double digits, presumably around 13. While in prison, Bernardo has been subjected to a number of attacks and was subsequently moved into a segregation unit for his own safety. Bernardo's application for parole in 2018, after 25 years in prison, was denied after only 30 minutes of deliberation. A lawyer in behalf of the victims' families reported that there's never been an apology by Paul Bernardo. There's never been any indication whatsoever of remorse. Indeed, Bernardo admitted to the court that he hadn't felt anything for his victims at the time of his sadistic crimes. Hey everyone! I just wanted to express how grateful I am that you took the time to listen to my narration. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I am Twisted Mind, and please enjoy the rest of your day. Salamat!